Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Should colleges consider race in admissions? The fate of millions of students could be decided as a case unfolds over affirmative action. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court on Monday listened to nearly 5 hours of oral arguments on if it's okay to consider race in college admissions. The group Students for Fair Admissions is suing Harvard and the University of North Carolina, saying their consideration of race unfairly puts African Americans at an advantage and other groups such as whites and Asians at a disadvantage, even though they're equally competitive in terms of merit. Here's what the group argues today.
Racial classifications are wrong. That principle was enshrined in our law at great cost following the Civil War.
Harvard and UNC, meanwhile, argue that it's important to ensure diversity at universities, adding that past Supreme Court presidents say the use of affirmative action is permissible. The justices, meanwhile, appear deeply divided along ideological lines. The three liberal justices defended the consideration of race, with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson questioning the very standing of the case.
And I'm worried that creates an inequity in the system with respect to being able to express your identity and, importantly, have it valued.
But Chief Justice John Roberts, who's conservative, expressed deep concerns about using race in the admission process, going back and forth with the Harvard lawyer.
I think it's important for you to establish whether or not granting a credit based solely on skin color is based on a stereotype when you say this brings diversity of viewpoint. It may not bring diversity of viewpoint in a particular case at all.
I talked to Kenny Hsu, the president of Colorado United and a supporter of the group suing Harvard. He said today's argument gave him more confidence in how the case would go.
What we're basically saying is stop discriminating on the basis of race. I mean, I think that's a pretty good standard that anybody of any race can get behind. Treat people according to their merits.
But the High Court could hold on to these high-profile cases until next June and not issue rulings until the end of the term. It's worth noting, though, that all 9 justices went to colleges that now consider race in admissions. That means if the court decides to ban it, the ruling would wipe out the affirmative action programs at the alma maters of all of them. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
And former President Trump today also made a plea to the Supreme Court. His legal team filed an emergency request to block a House committee from accessing his tax returns. The House has tried a number of avenues over the years to get a look at Trump's returns. On Thursday, a lower court ruling allowing for the disclosure of Trump's taxes goes into effect. But in the filing, Trump requests the court put an administrative hold on the release of the returns before that date approaches. The Supreme Court justices are considering whether to review the lower court's ruling. Legal abortions in the country fell by about 6% in the first 2 months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This is according to a report by an organization called We Count. They found that legal abortions dropped by more than 10,000 in July and August this year. 13 states imposed near total bans on abortion, and legal abortions there fell to almost zero. 9 other states also imposed major restrictions on abortion. The number of legal abortions fell by about 22,000 in all of those states compared to April. But in states where abortions remain legal, abortions rose by around 12,000 or 11%. The latest on the attack that led to head surgery for Paul Pelosi. The House Speaker's husband is expected to have a full recovery, and the suspect, David DePepe, is now facing new charges. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with the details.
Assault with a deadly weapon, targeting family of a public official, attempted murder. These are just a few of the charges suspect David DePepe is facing from San Francisco authorities. And the Department of Justice acting swiftly Monday to file federal charges, carrying the weight of 50 years behind bars for assault and attempted kidnapping. Revealing that officers found DePepe carrying a roll of tape, white rope, a second hammer, a pair of rubber and cloth gloves, and zip ties. And Speaker Pelosi was the target, officials say.
We have to put a stop to this. You know, the families of people who serve our country, our cities, our counties, our states, they don't deserve this. And we don't, as a society, we have to put a stop to this.
Law and order and respecting law enforcement is part of the solution, says former President Donald Trump, responding to the news on Sunday. Trump told Americana Media, quote, "With Paul Pelosi, that's a terrible thing. With all of them, it's a terrible thing. We have to give the police back their dignity, their respect. They can solve the problem." While President Biden says condemning is not enough and calls for people to do better at watching what they say.
That's the problem. We can't just say, I feel badly about the violence. We condemn it. Condemn what produces the violence, and this talk produces the violence.
Multiple high-level political figures from both sides have publicly denounced the attack, many calling for divisive political discourse to simmer down. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The CDC director has tested positive for COVID-19 yet again, about 2 weeks after her latest positive test. The CDC announced today Dr. Rochelle Walensky tested positive on Sunday. According to the agency, she experienced mild symptoms last week, was treated with Pfizer's COVID-19 pill Paxlovid, and then tested negative. But Sunday she started developing mild symptoms again and tested positive for the virus. President Biden and Dr. Anthony Fauci have also experienced a rebound infection after getting the Paxlovid treatment. The state of Arizona is a swing state this midterm cycle worth paying attention to. The state has a race for governor and a race for U.S. Senate, both of which are expected to be very competitive. To discuss the elections in Arizona, we spoke to Kelli Ward, chairwoman of the Arizona Republican Party. Here's a look. Kelli Ward, thank you so much for joining us.
So glad to be here. Exciting times.
Now, do you think there's a particular issue, like one single issue, that will really decide the race in Arizona?
Yeah, I think it's across the board, but the economy and inflation, the price of gas, the price of food, the price of housing, that is top of the mind for most of the voters here in this state. And they know that these radical leftist Democrat policies that have been pushed down from the Biden administration into our state are the reason why it costs almost twice as much to fill up their car, to get to their job, to do what they need to do. Their money is not going as far as it used to, as it did under President Trump and under Republican leadership. And so they're looking forward to making a change in November of 2022.
Are you confident in the election infrastructure in your state this time around? I know Arizona was at the center of election fraud discussions in 2020. Will we know the winner on election night?
Well, you know, I think we have a lot more work to do on the election integrity front. We have been at the forefront of fighting for election integrity. We have been at the forefront of fighting to restore voter confidence. And there are people who fight against that. Leftists and, as far as I'm concerned, fake Republicans want us to just believe them rather than have them show us through transparency in the process. So I think that Maricopa County in particular, with the current Board of Supervisors, even though it's made up of Republicans, and Recorder Stephen Richer, who instead of opening up and shining light on the process, has shut down and shut out, as well as name calling and really doing nothing to enhance voter confidence. They are still at the helm. And so we, as the Republican Party, are fighting to make sure that we have poll workers and poll observers so that we have eyes on the process. I think they will drag it out after the election. I think, you know, unless it is a complete and total sweep, which I think it will be with huge margins, it might be a few days before we know it, which is a shame. Bigger states, Florida, for example, are able to give their voters, they know who won the election on election night. We have people that drag their feet. We have people that make it difficult. They have people that make it difficult for some people to trust the results of elections when they have all the power in the world to give us that result on election night.
This is certainly a concerning trend that we've seen, where election results now take days to find out, opening the door to fraud, or, you know, not this type of, if nothing else, this type of delay is, like you said, hurting confidence in the electoral process, and it needs to be figured out.
Well, I think that one of the things that in Maricopa County, the biggest county in Arizona and one of the biggest counties in the entire nation, certainly the biggest Republican county in the country, there are many things that they can do. They know that there will be a lot of votes coming in, so they could already be staffing up with their election workers to be able to handle that incoming load of ballots that come in on election day, because people do not have confidence in putting their ballots into a drop box that isn't monitored, even putting it into the mail and wondering if it ever is delivered. I saw a story today that a mail truck had caught on fire and there might have been ballots in there. I know that my mail from where I live in Mojave County, Arizona, goes through Las Vegas. And sometimes there's a delay from Las Vegas for those ballots to get back for where they need to be counted. And so there are processes that these counties, especially Maricopa, could put into place. They know where their shortcomings are, and hopefully they're going to fill those holes so that we can have confidence in those election results and we can get them on election night.
Kelli Ward, chair of the Arizona Republican Party, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.